class. Let's now talk about another lesson in Unit 9. This time, we talk about the competencies of communicators and journalists. So in this lesson, we are going to go through the different competencies that are expected out of communicators and journalists that makes their job meaningful and useful to the society. So in this point, we are going to talk about the different roles of language as well as the role or the competencies of communicators and journalists that will enhance our understanding as to how we become effective and responsible communicators and journalists later on. So make sure that you have with you your notebooks and pens to jot down the salient points of our discussion, and make sure that if there are questions that may come or that may arise during the course of our discussion, you are able to jot it down so that we can discuss them during our online feedbacking. Alright, so without much ado, let's now begin as I present to you a general concept that we revolve around during the course of our discussion. It says here, communicators and journalists, as professionals in the field of communication, must possess essential competencies for them to deliver their services meaningfully and truthfully. Therefore, these communicators and journalists must possess these essential, take note, essential competencies that will help them deliver their services meaningfully and truthfully, especially if you are assigned in the field of communication. You must be able to exercise meaningful and truthful communication to your broader audience. In this sense, the differing audience that you bring the communication or that you bring the message into. Now, for this lesson, we have the following learning objectives. First, it is to define the role of language in communication and identify and explain the 4 competencies of communicators and journalists. So with that being said, I hope that it is clear that we need to define first unsa ang role sa language in communication, and we need to identify and explain the 4 competencies of communicators and journalists. What are these competencies and how they play an essential and vital role in enhancing and making sure, right, that these competencies will be practiced in the day-to-day undertakings of communicators and journalists. All right, so let's begin with the discussion of the role of language in communication, as well as the tackling of the 4 competencies of communicators and journalists. We must be able to answer this essential question in our discussion. How can people avoid miscommunication? Something that is very integral in the point that we are making in this discussion. How can people avoid miscommunication? So with that, we now talk and enhance our understanding with the role of language, right, in the day-to-day undertakings of communicators and journalists, so that we may be able to anchor our comprehension of the different competencies of communicators and journalists. So unsa ang role sa language when we talk about being communicators and journalists? So first, let's discuss the broader concept of what language is. Language is a part of human interaction. It's a given that, with the use of language, there is human interaction. It enables people to express their thoughts, ideas, and emotions. And language plays a crucial role in shaping the culture and one's identity. So with language, we are able to maximize, right, our identity as well as our culture. We are able to shape it. It plays a very crucial role in doing so. And it enables us to express our thoughts, ideas, and emotions by helping us shape culture and identity. And it gives us a huge piece and parcel of human interaction. Now, language in its essence is very important because it contributes in the development of identities, of culture, and societies, wherein children acquire their mother tongue, which helps them deliver messages. So if you're going to look at history, it has always been a huge contributing factor. Language has always been a huge contributing factor as to the development of the identities of different cultures and societies across the globe. And with that development of culture and societies, their identities, no, children were able to also acquire their mother tongue, in which helps them deliver their messages. Mabitaw nga, it's very important that it is now integrated into our curriculum kaning mother tongue because mo magyud nato ang gigikanan, being able to understand, no. So og kung magdiskurso pa ta, kung kaybaw ka sa mga storyang Bisaya, kaybaw ka mo distinguish nga kaniday nga lengguwahe gikan di ni ani nga rehiyon sa Pilipinas, ani nga pundok sa tawo diari nga komunidad, then you're able to understand better how these identities of culture and society is being passed on from one generation to another. Because the problem that we have faced for so many times is the essential question that we're trying to answer: miscommunication. So being able to avoid miscommunication calls for the understanding of our identity as a culture and as a society. With that in mind, dili na to lisod-lisoron. Yes, we have a universal language identified and embraced, but we also need to make sure that there is preservation of our mother tongue, because with the use of our mother tongue, it will help us more to pass on, right, and deliver the messages that we have in our localities. Kumaga, from a general concept, ato na karon siyang palawman with the use of mother tongue. So mas dali na karon ang communication. So that's a very vital role of language into communication. Hence, Republic Act 7356. This law emphasizes the role of language in developing and advancing Philippine culture. So dili nato ni siya gina-discuss just because it is embedded in a particular curriculum or it is embedded accordingly by the school. Instead, we discuss this, or in fact, we discuss this because balaod di siya. RA 7356, wherein ug atuan tanawon ang synopsis or ang buod sa mao nga balaod. It emphasizes, or the law emphasizes, the role of language in developing and advancing Philippine culture. And by Philippine culture, it is from the islands of Luzon all the way to the islands of Mindanao. So yung una na ka-importante ang language in developing, advancing, and hopefully preserving, enriching Philippine culture. Now, another role of language is to allow people to convey ideas and thoughts through a meaningful practice of communication. Take note of the statement, class. This is giving us, or this is allowing us to convey ideas and thoughts, no, through a meaningful practice of what? Of communication. So if we are able to communicate well, given the diversity of languages used, however we are able to put meaning to it, then it becomes now a meaningful experience for all of us. There is language barrier within Ligo City, within the country, within Mindanao, Visayas, and Luzon. So if we put it into context, language now has a very important role to play because this is giving people, right, the opportunity to convey their ideas and their thoughts through a meaningful practice. And that meaningful practice is what we call communication. So dili lang na siya kung nagstoryahanay mo or you exchanges thoughts. It's something that is developing and being enriched over time, same as our culture in the country. So we also need to understand that yes, we can be good and we can be eloquent in speaking English, pero there is also a need for us to also become experts of our own language because it helps us communicate meaningfully with other members or with other communities in the country and in our locality, right? So that's the role of language in communication. It's very important because kumbaga og imong hunahunahon moy tumong sa communication. It's the tool for human interaction. It is a huge part of human interaction because it gives us now the ability to express the thoughts, ideas, and emotions that we have by being able to contribute to the identities of our cultures and societies. Gani, importante nga bata pa lang ta, makahibaw o makasabot na ta sa storya sa to mother tongue. Right? The language, the vocabulary, and the grammar of mother tongue because it will help us deliver messages to our next of kin, to the next generation of our families and of our communities. And why is this important? And how important is this? In fact, because of the mere significance of this concept, it is put into Law 7356. Muna nga language gives people the avenue to convey ideas and thoughts through a meaningful experience of communication. Now, let's talk about the 4 competencies of communicators and journalists. I'm not saying that if you do not have this competency, dili na ka pwede mahimong communicator o journalist. Or if you already have these 4 competencies practiced, you're already credible and good, a good communicator or journalist. This only means that these are only the competencies of communicators and journalists that we need to examine in ourselves if we do embody them, and how do we embody them. If we have 4 competencies, well and good. But the question is, are we able to embody them in our day-to-day activities? If so, what is the essence of knowing these competencies, and how do we enrich the embodiment of these competencies through continuous development and continuous practice? So let's begin. First, we have the most important, if you ask me, listening. Listening is an interpersonal and professional skill that affect people's lives. Journalists listen to obtain truthful information and understand their subject. Meaning to say, among the 4 competencies of communicators and journalists, we need to be able to listen. We need to be able to practice the discipline of listening to the truthful information and filtering, right, the subject in order for us to understand it better. Hence, I coined the term critical listening. Ano may critical thinking? Sir, na po critical listening? Yes. Because if there is no critical listening, everything will be truthful. As long as there is basis, there is evidence nga mapakita sa imuha, everything will be truthful. But listening is not only hearing the voice, but listening could also be observing the gesture, observing the body language, the eye contact made. That could be part of listening if you really understand the concept, right? Remember that this is something interpersonal. Dili ni siya pwede itudlo. Sige, you will learn about listening. Dili ni siya pwede itudlo. This is something that should be rooted to you as a person and then practiced from time to time. How do you do that? By being by socializing to people, right? And being able to understand what you listen to. Listening plays a very vital concept because if you are unable to listen, sige ka lang storya, sige ka lang, ikaw lang pirmi magda sa conversation, then you will not be able to know the other side of the coin. Or worse, you will not be able to understand what is being communicated to you. So with listening comes the concept of understanding what you have listened to. Another is speaking. Speaking class is a skill effortlessly learned by people because we learn it from the day we are born. In fact, mag-edad ka, let's say 6 months, 8 months, people will now try to elicit the sounds that you make. What is the first word that you can utter. So it is something that is effortlessly learned by people. However, it is developed over time. Now, speaking in a journalistic point of view, as well as as a communicator, it must deliver messages clearly and precisely. There is a need for us to practice speaking, to enrich and enhance the capability of speaking, be it in public or be it in a small gathering. Kailangan kahibaw jud ka mga istorya. This is something that has been taught to in our family since when we were younger. You should be able to speak. You should know how to speak. And not just by simply talking. You should know how to convey your message in a persuasive manner and in a comprehensive manner. Dili pa de sige lang ka storya tapos wala na kay point. Dili na matuhog ang imong ginaingon. So, their manner of speaking can directly or indirectly influence the public. That is why speaking is a powerful tool, especially for communicators and journalists, because with this tool, they are able to influence people. They are able to shape the opinion of people. Mabitaw na during election season, class, we have the campaign period for people to talk, for candidates to talk. And the manner that they talk, diha nimo makita how prepared and how sincere they are with running. Of course, over time, ikaw ba naman tagaan ka og, let's say, approximately 2 months to campaign. Kunya months before, nagsugod na ka og tapok sa mga tao, then ultimately, there is an avenue for you to improve the way you talk. But if you are really just going with the waves, but you ka kasabot sa imong ginastorya, sa imong tumong og tinguha while you are running, then you will be talking kanang lots of air, talking lots of nonsense. What the message that you're going to convey is going to be different, because though speaking is a powerful tool, if you cannot walk the talk, well, your purpose or your tool will ultimately be defeated. Masipag unsa ka kahawd bang istorya, unsa ka compelling, pero kung di po nato makita ang imuhang ginastorya sa imong ginahimo, then ultimately it will not influence the public in a manner that you would like them to be. And I'm talking in the context of politicians. Gusto nila sila ma-elect kay maon nilang tumong og tinguha, to provide access to education, to health services, to economic kanang appraisal, so on and so forth. Pero makita nimo sa ilahang agi, sa ilang lihok, dili dayon ana. And I'm not trying to disregard nga the fact that they are still civilians at this point wherein they cannot really do much because wala pa sila sa position. But my point here is, if you're someone who has been given the opportunity, let's say an incumbent official or an official of an organization that provides services, or bank, co-ops, whatever, that should be manifested in your endeavors. Diha lang ka mamahimong advocate ana nga matang tungod kay nidagan ka sa politika. You become hypocrite. So speaking, class, is something that we need to understand, that it delivers a message clearly and precisely. Kailangan ang imong mensahe nga gina-communicate is something that is seen. Kumbaga, close to tangible. Makita sa tao, makita sa imo nga mo imong ginahimo, og labaw sa tanan, masabtan sa tao, nga mo ay importante para sa imuha. Dili lang, kay imo ra siyang ginastorya, pero wala rin mo siya ginapuy-an. Muna nga, you need to live the characteristics that you show. You need to live the principles that you try to embody. If you're someone that is isog ka, kay kahibaw ka sa imong gibuhat, well, panindigan mo nga isog ka. Pero kung pretentious ka, isog-isog ka nga pretentious, well, makita yun na sa imong agi. Makita yun na sa the way you present yourself, the way you behave yourself in public. And that is something that is developing. Don't get me wrong. That is something that is developing over time. Similar to the discipline of speaking. You become good over time by being able to have consistent practice and evaluation. Dili pa sige lang ka-practice of public speaking, sige lang ka-practice on how to convey messages without being evaluated by those who are also doing the same thing far more longer than you, or those who are more knowledgeable because they studied it, they spent years, hours studying communication, studying public speaking. Then again, among the competencies of communicators and journalists, speaking is a very important tool because of the mere fact that it influences the public. So dako kayo na siya nga tabang whether you utilize it well or you are unable to utilize it well. Speaking can either make or break a particular message that you're trying to convey. Another competency expected out of communicators and journalists is writing. Writing class comes now with the perception na, sir, igo ra may mamina o mustorya, ngano kailangan mo musuwat? So, writing is something, I can also relate to that because for the longest time, di po yung ganahan magsuwat. But I realized that if I must continue or if I want to continue become an effective communicator and journalist, I must also be able to know how to write effectively, how to write comprehensively, because journalists and communicators are expected to be good writers. Kung kaybaw ka maminaw, kaybaw ka mustorya, it's a no-brainer nga kaybaw po jud ka musuwat. Mabitaw, if you look back into your junior high school years and even your elementary years, if you join journalism seminars or journalism trainings, aduna siya point of writing. Pero it is also emphasized there that there is a need for you to know how to speak, for you to know how to deliver the article or the news that you are writing. Right? Dili pwedeng kaybaw lang ka musuwat, kaybaw po ka mustorya. Di po pwedeng kaybaw ka mustorya, di ka kaybaw musuwat. Kaya it is expected that when you are a journalist or a communicator, you are also a good writer. You must possess or you must compose precise pieces about events and issues. Even, kanina na kanindot class, if you have photographic memory, then you can really become a good writer because photographic memory man ka. Mahinumduman man nimo sa inahitabo atong taknaa, sa inahitabo ato nga event, and you are able to translate it, you're able to put it into writing, then you are going to be very, very credible. But if you are unable to do that, then you must put it into writing immediately in order for you to be able to understand what happened and what were the effects or what were the result of that particular event that had happened. Now, this also comes to mind that when you are a communicator or a journalist, you should be mindful of the correct sentence structure, grammar, and flow. Let me say that again, and let me paraphrase the sentence that I've said. If you are a student, it is a no-brainer that you are mindful of the correct sentence structure, grammar, and flow. That's why I'm telling you in essay activities that I give, I'm very, very crucial with the sentence structure, grammar, and the usage of the words in a particular topic. Because kung magpataka ra kag suwat diha, ya dili na to ma-evaluate. What's the purpose of studying? What's the purpose of answering those tasks if you are only going to just simply put there, kana di mao. So we need to be able to correct ourselves. And I'm not discounting myself, no. I'm including myself because even if I'm already a teacher, I must also still learn, unlearn and relearn the things that have hindered me from becoming excellent about a particular discipline. So as students, we should be mindful of the usage of correct sentence structure, grammar, and flow, and everything in between. That is similar to the competencies of communicators and journalists in terms of being a good writer. Kailangan atong mahatag ang balita, atong mahatag ang mensahe nga atong gina-communicate sa tao in a manner that is precise, in a manner that is comprehensive, and most of all, truthful to the event. Whether the event is boring, interesting, sadya, bibo, or normal. According to the tempo of what we think is interesting to the people, we should still do it with integrity and we should be truthful with it. Mabitaw makita nimo class ug maminaw kang diskurso sa mga politiko, makita nimo din kung kinsa ang mga politiko nga gasuwat sa ilang plano and are able to communicate it well by speaking, or kinsa po to mga politiko nga wa nagasuwat sa plano pero dugay nang gisigig isip kung unsang ilahang mga plano tumong og tingwa sa pagdagan. That's why there is no efficiency in speaking. But the real question there, especially if you're voting for councilors, senators, congressmen or women, party list representative, is how well they can craft that particular program, platform, or balaod, no, with the use of effective writing. Muna di ko mo believe aning mga kandidato nga sige howd kay mangistorya or even dili howd mangistorya but have the guts and the balls to run for office. Ako jud na kong pangutana, kumudagag konsehal, kumudagag senator, kumudagag whatever, isa ra gyud ako pangutana, sir, aside sa pagka-howd ka mangistorya, kahibaw ka masuwat og balaod? That comes with a no-brainer question kung kasabot ba siya sa balaod, kasabot ba siya sa constitution. Kay ugwa gani, why are you running for city council? Nga man ka kasabot sa balaod, wa man ka kabaw sa constitution. What are the different salient provisions of the constitution? And most importantly, di man ka kabaw sa imong trabaho. You don't know how to do your job. Magsalig ka sa imong staff, magsalig ka proofreading sa imong staff. We are wasting the money of the people to you. Basically. Muna nga, I am tempted to really question politicians and candidates that I am sure and I know for a fact nga di jud kay bawo mosuwat og ordinansa. Nga igor mo attend og session niya wala man gyapon pulos. We should not be voting for these kinds of people because kaning competencies sa communicators o journalist class pwede ra gyud nato ni integrate sa atuang tanan. Dili lang kay communicator or journalist ka, kundi sa tanan, labi na elected officials, the leaders of our communities. Di man kay bawo mosuwat og balaod, di magsalig og staff. Unya ang staff nga gikuha is barista. Meaning to say, ni-graduate og law. Ang staff nga gikuha is communication or English, major in English. Di howd gyud sa grammar. Pero dili sila ang naghago. And I know so many of these candidates in the local level, no, nga ana ay mga guts nga modagan pero wala joy nahibal-an. Di kay bawo mo suwat, di kay bawo mo basa. And that is something that irritates me because we are wasting our votes for these kinds of people. We are wasting the time and money of the public, of the people, aning mga tawhana. Dili angayan. But nonetheless, we're going back to the subject. Writing is a very important skill for all of us. Lastly, we have reading. Journalists and communicators conduct research to gain information. That's a given, right? They seek and read data and other necessary details that are relevant to the issue assigned to them. That's why research is very important to gain information. It's also given, right? It's an embedded thought. Nga kung mubasa ka for you to research, to gain information, di ka mubasa og mga research studies nga nadto pang 19 kupong-kupong. You look for research studies dated 2015 onwards. That's a no-brainer in research because relevancy and time-boundedness is important in research. Muna nga, we need to understand what we need or what materials we are going to read in order for us to gain the necessary and essential information. Reading class as a competency of communicators and journalists helps us seek and read data and other necessary details that are relevant to the issue assigned to them. Meaning to say, if we are voracious readers, the key here or the word here is voracious readers. Boraot, sir? No, voracious readers. Meaning to say, you are very interested in reading. Masipag unsa kabaga ang libro, unsa kataas ang essay, you read. You're a voracious reader. There must always be the concept or the intention of seeking data that is necessary for you or for that relevant issue that is assigned to you. I hope you get the point. So when you read, kailangan na nakay intention. Unsay pulos ani imong ginabasa. What does it mean to you? Unsa may gamit ani sa imo? That's a very, very important concept when you read. So as journalists and communicators, you need to read a lot para aduna kay bala, para ma-connect nimo ang mga events, ang mga phenomena and happenings to this current information that is circling around. That is the way for us to avoid fake news and other assumption of truths that is not even close to the reality. Now, after talking about all those salient points, let's now try to wrap up the discussion. First point, language class is a vital part of human interaction. It enables us to communicate with one another, and it also helps shape our cultures and societies. Journalists and communicators must possess the competencies of their profession. Such competencies include, but are not limited to, listening, speaking, writing, and reading. Now, with these competencies in mind, how do you think you are able to use them and utilize them? More importantly, improve and continuously develop them, that you will be able to garner, right, the necessary skills that will enhance the different competencies that you possess as a communicator and as a journalist. And most importantly, class, how are we able to integrate this to our daily lives as well? All right? So that is a very interesting concept that we need to learn. And if we are able to, then we are going to be able to utilize it best to our advantage and most of all to our endeavors. So make sure that you have jotted down the salient points of this discussion as well as the questions that may have arisen from our topic in order for us to discuss them further in the next meetings. That's all.